You're listening to the Debt Free Dad podcast with Brad Nelson. Brad and his co-hosts experience the anxiety of living paycheck to paycheck before learning the fundamentals of financial security. They are now on a mission to empower regular people to pay off their debt for good and enjoy happier, less stressful lives. Keep listening for inspirational interviews, tips, tricks, and practical advice to gain financial freedom.
Hey, how's everyone doing today? You can find us on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. Just search Brad Nelson or Debt Free Dad. And as always, welcome to today's show. Remember to get all the resources, show notes, and links for today's show. You can head over to thedebtfreedadpodcast.com and check out episode 193. Again, that's thedebtfreedadpodcast.com, episode 193. And you can also find all of our other episodes there as well. And you can check out the YouTube videos there.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. We are here with one of my favorite podcasts that I love. It's helping me financially to be better with my money, better with my mindset. And it's called Debt Free Dad. I love it because the way that everything is promoted and shared on the show is easy things that you can do, difficult to accomplish sometimes, but easy to do, things that you can do to help your financial situation be better for you, for your family, for your kids. And my guest was on my Dad's Space podcast, and I invited him back because I wanted to talk podcasting as well, because I admire his podcast skills. I admire his team and everything that he does. And I'm so happy that he agreed to come back. Brad Nelson is here from the Debt Free Dad. Welcome back, Brad. Good to see you.
Hey, good to see you, David. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It is exciting. And I was admiring your hat, which I love. And I'm like, I need a hat, Brad. So we're working on that. So
We're working on that.
I want to show off my Debt-Free Dad hat. That is great branding and everything. I love what you do. Brad, so for those who haven't met you yet, they're in luck because they just found their next great new podcast to listen to. Yeah. Tell us about your show and a little bit, maybe how did this all start for you, for your podcast?
Yeah. So we created the Debt Free Dad podcast going on. We just wrapped up our fourth year, our fourth season, and recorded 200 episodes now. And the idea behind the podcast was really just to open up the conversation about personal finance stress and the paycheck to paycheck living lifestyle, and really to provide steps and ideas and really to challenge just the status quo of how most people are handling their money, which is very poorly. is what a lot of us experience, right? So the idea behind the show is really just that. It's to introduce these ideas of, debt-free living, or a life with just far less debt, maybe even to the point of a life without payments and, credit cards and car loans and things like that. And so we started this with two other co-hosts back in late 2019, early 2020, right before COVID. And this past year, we now added on two additional co-hosts. We have about 5 of us on the show now. And the reason behind that is because we really want to provide perspective from people from all different walks of life and people who have had different experiences with money. So we've got a single girl who's on our show. We've got Amber, who also lives up in Canada from a completely different country, and talking about it, from their aspect up in Canada and things that they experience and you guys experience, right, David? And I've got my brother who I have on and who works for Debt Free Dad full time. And he's on because he used to be one of the biggest kind of, I guess you could call, haters of this idea of living debt free. Like, you'll never be able to do that, right? So he now has drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, and he has went on his own debt-free journey, became debt-free outside of his mortgage, and now again works for Debt Free Dad full time and is helping us grow this business. So it's just a pretty cool whole mindset and journey that he's been on. So he's on to share his perspective from start to finish. And then I've got Chris on, and Chris used to be a financial coach, started out very much just like me, helping people get out of debt. He ended up taking a different path. He's got a coached teenage kids about personal finance for, I think, 13 plus years in the school system here, and retired and decided to say, you know what, I don't want to retire, but I want to do something where I enjoy. He ended up buying this little small ice cream shop in a tourist type town in Georgia area. And he's now doing that completely full time. So he talks about financial freedom from the perspective of, I'm in my later years and I spent time getting out of debt. I made a lot of the same types of mistakes a lot of other people did, but now I've opened myself up to be able to do new things and create new opportunities and new experiences in my life because I've took control of my finances. So the cool part about our show is that we're all normal people. None of us make 7 figures or even well over 6 figures. We're all normal people. We drive normal cars. We live in normal houses. We all pretty much have, normal jobs. I mean, there's nothing really fancy or exciting about any of us. I mean, we're all good people, right? But we're normal people just like everybody else. And we're just showing people like, hey, there's a different way to go about this money thing. And we're just sharing the tips and tricks and things that have helped us over the years to really kind of amplify our life in that area to help us be able to focus on other things in life besides just personal finances and money all the time.
I love it. So if I get a debt-free dad hat and I go to the ice cream shop, do I get a free ice cream cone, or is that like trader barter system or what?
It would be interesting, David, if you didn't tell Chris. Yeah, I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure Chris would probably hook you up pretty quickly. So he'd probably be like shocked. Like, where did you get that?
How do I get a hat? Yeah, no, right.
Right.
I love it. So yeah, no, I love the podcast, Brad. I love everything about it. I talked about this on Dad Space. I love the feeling of the podcast. You don't feel like I'm being preached to. Like, I feel like I'm being encouraged and supported, and to hear all the different stories. It's not just one single voice who's the expert on everything, and do my 5 steps and you'll win. And the answer to every question is my same 5 steps. You have different voices that come on and say, well, in my situation, it worked better if I went left, and you say we go right. So we have a conversation around what we do with our debt, not just being preached at. So I really, really enjoy the spirit and the context of your podcast.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'd like to say that we do that with absolute intentionality, but I think, I think that is what naturally comes through our show, is because we just are normal people, Yeah. And I think that's why we're able to have those open discussions. And, I've also done enough coaching to understand, like, it's like, look, I mean, not everything works the same for every single person based on their situation, and it's just not one way or the highway. And I like, and especially even in our community, how we have always kept this kind of open format of like, I want people to have a voice and share their opinions on other people's situations and what they would do based on their experiences, because we all come from different backgrounds. And I think it provides, like you said, a really good conversation around a topic that can be pretty complicated for most people.
Yeah. And then I'll talk more about the community as well, Brad. I want people to understand it's more than a podcast. It's more than just listening to somebody talk to you about your finances. You have a whole community around this. Talk more about that too.
Yeah. So we started out with our membership back in, it's like 7-8 years ago now. And that's where we started originally, is just opening up more of a group format of coaching and getting people the education and really giving them that ongoing support and accountability in this community. And so that's where we started. And the idea behind the community was really, we wanted to focus on the support and accountability, because, the principles of personal finance are the principles. The information's out there. Like, if you want to get out of debt, you do a Google search. I mean, you're going to find probably 2 billion results of how to do it. It's not like we live in a world where there's a lack of information. We all have the information. The information's out there about what you should do. But a lot of us lack a guided approach, more of a hand-holding approach. And, for a lot of us, sometimes too much information can be a bad thing, because it keeps you stuck, because all you're doing is reading what this person says, what this person says, what this person says, and what those people say, and none of them probably agree. And it's like, well, I don't want to do the wrong thing. So then what do? We do nothing. Right.
Yeah.
And nothing really gets better. So the idea behind the community is just to say, hey, look, we've helped a lot of people get out of debt. We've gotten out of our debt ourselves. We're just going to show you, like, this is what worked for us. This is what didn't work for us. And if you want to take these pieces and put them into your life, you'll succeed. Now, can you manipulate and move the pieces around based on your life? Sure. We don't recommend that for everything, obviously, because you do have to follow the principles, right? I mean, numbers are numbers, math is math. Like, we got to make sure things work. But people are able to kind of pick and choose what works for them and what doesn't, and then they can go about it and then have us to support and hold them accountable throughout the journey of them reaching their financial goals, getting out of debt, saving money, learning how to budget. And it's really creating this environment of creating better habits, creating better financial mindsets, creating better behaviors, choices. And because we can't learn to change our finances in overnight or 30 or 60, 90 days. We need this winning environment for a long enough time to really change the core of how we manage our money. And that's the idea behind that community. And then what we did is a few years later, like I said, back in late 2019, 2020, started a podcast. And the idea behind the podcast was to open up our audience to more people and say, hey, look, these are the people that we're helping. Like, this is what they're doing. This is what we did in our lives. This is how we've helped these people do it. And once a month, at least once, sometimes twice a month, we like to bring on a Roots member who's in our community and bring them on to share their story and have them come on and say, hey, look, this is where I started. These were the money mistakes that I was making.
Yeah.
And it's been awesome to bring on those people because, again, they are an extension of our normal people podcast, right? And to bring them on and say, hey, look, guys, I actually applied the stuff that they're talking about on this podcast to my life, and look at where I'm at now in just a short period of time later. Like, if I can do this, you can do it, right? And so it's been a really good, between the podcast and the community, it's been a really good way to get that message across to a broader audience and a bigger audience of getting people to understand that there is help out there.
Yeah. And what I love as a listener is I hear myself in your co-hosts, in yourself, but also in the stories of your Roots community members. I hear my own situation reflected back to me, and I hear people wrestling with the exact same things that I'm wrestling with. So I feel like I'm there in the room during the recording, and you're speaking to me, and I feel like I'm part of the community just by listening, which is a great door to your community and a brilliant way of tying your podcast into what you do at Debt Free Dad. I love how you've kind of built this all around. And I was kind of going to ask you what, like, chicken and egg thing, what came first, the podcast or Debt Free Dad? And it sounds like the Debt Free Dad started it, and then the podcast came in as a support. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of it was just because I like to just talk about it. I think, money is just such a taboo topic, and I love challenging just the status quo out there, even to the point of people thinking that I'm just weird, right? and that's okay. I'm okay with that. It's like, look, I want you to feel that way, because when I first started learning about this information and hearing about a potential life without debt and credit cards and car payments, I thought it was weird too, right?
Yeah.
And when you think something's weird, that means you're challenging your normal mindset, which is important when it comes to relearning how to manage your money. You've got to start doing some things different. And once you're willing to do that, amazing and fun things can happen for you. And so, yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Good. And then, so you must have gone to school for years. You have a university degree in radio. You must be some professional guy who has all the answers to life and podcasting. How did you yourself find yourself behind a microphone? How did that happen?
Yeah, I wish I had all that education. Yeah. You want to know what? I just started, and that is where the education came from, was just a lot of work and just listening to other podcasts, not always listening with an ear of the way a lot of people consume podcasts, but listening for how do they run their show? What were the things that I liked? What were the things that I didn't like? When do they do their breaks? Like, even today, we just hired a company to help us make our podcast better. And that's one of the things for me as a podcaster is, like, I love people who give us really great feedback on our show, but I also almost value more of the negative feedback that we get, because I want to know of that, like, what can we take out of there to make our show better? Because if I just hear it's great all the time, it's hard for me to improve it. Right. But I want to hear from someone who goes through it with more of a trained ear of saying, okay, I've listened to a lot of podcasts before. I've helped people grow their podcast, make them better. These are the things that I see that you need to change and tweak. And sometimes it's not even like the big things. It's probably all the little things that we're not doing right.
We can kind of pick up from there. I want to jump into talking about the stats that you were mentioning as well, and kind of encouraging podcasters that are listening, as far as, they have these big metrics around success and they have these big numbers, but probably just being consistent is probably the most important metric for us to think about, right?
Yeah. So I would say so.
Jump into that. Yeah.
I think from when we first started, I kind of, I started learning about podcasts and just, I knew going into it, it was going to be a long journey. I did not have any sort of anticipation of being like the next Joe Rogan, right? and being like this next, superstar podcaster. I knew that, building a podcast show and building an audience, it was going to be a commitment and a grind, right? And so I think having that intention going into it, I also went into it knowing that it's not always going to be fun. Like, getting on a show, doing the interview and doing some of those things is the exciting parts of doing the show. But, it's coming up with content ideas and really figuring out what your audience needs to hear and wants to hear. And, there is some grinding part of that does take some time. And it's like, you got to wake up and push through some of that where you don't feel like doing some of those things. Right. And so I think as an early podcaster, if you're just getting started, just understand that those feelings are normal. It doesn't mean that you're not, good at podcasting or you're just a normal person. I think in every job that you have, no matter what it is, there's things that you like and there's things that you don't like. And, podcasting is definitely going to have a share of both of those. But yeah, I found these interesting when we just did episode 200. We actually shared these on our episode, but it says 90% of podcasts don't get past episode 3.
Wow.
Which is fascinating. And it says that's 1.8 million who quit after episode 3. And then of the 200,000 that are left, so they're kind of looking at 2 million podcasts that had started. Of the 200,000 that had left, 90% will quit after just the first 20 episodes.
Oh my gosh.
So that's another 180,000 gone. So of the 2 million, there's only about 20,000 podcasts that are left after episode 20.
Okay, so Brad, why do you think that is? What's the reason?
Lack of consistency and commitment, I think. That's it. And I think, what we tend to do is probably go into it with this perfectionist attitude,
right.
Or if we feel like, man, nobody's listening and we get maybe a little down on ourselves or, we just feel like we're not good enough. And the reality is you just haven't been doing it long enough. You just got to keep doing it. You got to keep pushing that content. Even if you only got 1 or 2 listeners that are out there, you got to keep pushing it. You got to keep doing it. And, obviously we also want to be reasonable too, is that we want to just say, hey, does our show stink? Like, do we need to make it better? And I think, giving up altogether, though, I don't think is the best way, but maybe reconsidering things like, hey, get some people that, get yourself in a community of other podcasters and maybe get some people to give you some reviews of your show and say, hey, I like it, but this is where you need to improve or you need to kind of think about improving. I think, relying on people that have some experience, I think is a really good thing rather than just up and say quitting. Right. But I think that's probably the biggest area that most of us probably struggle with as anything in life and podcasting for sure is just commitment and consistency. And I think if you can find a system that works for you to remain consistent with pushing out content and being consistent with it, whether you're putting out 1 episode a week or 1 episode every 2 weeks or 1 episode a month or whatever you're doing, commit to that. And no matter what, you got to do it. And I think of the 4 years that we have been on our show, I think we've only there were only 2 times that we weren't able to put out content, and they were due to some life events that were happening. Yeah. And unfortunately, there was just nothing we could do. So what we did during those that short break was we just went back and found some of our most popular episodes, and we just did replays of those, and people loved them. Yeah. But that was the only time in those 4 years that and we record all year. We shoot, our goal is 50 episodes a year. Wow. And we haven't missed outside of just those 2 times. We've been consistent every single week with it. And so I think, you got to find what works for you and just commit to it. Just commit like, hey, we're going to put out X amount of episodes for this period of time throughout the year. And we're just going to grind it out and do it. And if you can do it and push through the I don't feel like it, or I don't know if I'm good enough, or, if you just push through that, man, your show will eventually get better and it will grow and your audience will get bigger and, things will improve. But I think that's where most people give up, is that they don't see that success right out of the gate and they feel like, well, that didn't work, and they quit. When all it really might need is just some refining, some more practice, and just more commitment. You think about marriage, David, like when you get married to somebody, right? That first year might be okay, but where the marriage really grows is the ongoing commitment in that relationship. It's not like, it's not everything right away, but if you're in a long relationship, it's a commitment to make that relationship grow and to be really, really good. And it's no different when it comes to, like a podcast. It's that commitment and that consistency that's really going to make the difference.
What, back in your first 21 episodes, we'll say, what was some of your success metrics that told you were on the right path? How did you determine, because I hear a lot of people say this in podcasting, I don't know what good looks like. What was that thing that said, okay, we are on the right path? How did you measure that?
Yeah, in the first 21 episodes, I don't know that I'll be truthful. I don't think we really had any.
Okay.
I think what we did is, because we started our podcast after everything else, because it wasn't like we started our podcast first and then built around it.
Okay.
We had stuff that we were already doing, and then we put the podcast on top of it. Good. So for us, I think we were able to really lean on that audience that we offered the podcast to start. And we said, hey, we're going to start the show, and we would love for you guys to give us your feedback. And I think that's what we originally started it out with, was just that initial audience that we could send it to. And that an audience for us was our email list. And we don't have like a huge email list. It's not like this massive thing. But I think for us, it was getting those first few bits and pieces of feedback from people and asking them, what do you guys want to learn more about? What do you guys want to hear? Looking at the industry or your niche, so to speak, and saying, okay, what are popular topics around that right now? And I think, we just started pushing that content out. We started to see our downloads were increasing, but it was a slow go, for that first year, for sure. Even the first couple of years, but I think that's, for us, the feedback came from our audience, because even today it still should be from the audience, because that's who we're creating it for.
Right.
And that's what we relied on initially, is that, this is working. We're getting good feedback. It's helpful. It's all the things that you said, David, when you opened up the show here today. It's you can relate, gives you hope. It's giving you some ideas, things that you could take away and start doing right away. And so once we heard that, we knew we had something going. It was just like, okay, we just got to keep doing this. And then what are the tweaks along the way that we can do to make it better?
Some of the things you mentioned earlier was that you like getting praise, but you also liked hearing some of that feedback that helped you shape your show. Maybe a little hard to hear sometimes, but some feedback from your listeners or the community about how you could do the show better. What were some of those things that you heard back from your community and went, okay, yeah, I can see that. We can tweak, we can fix and readjust. What kind of things come to mind?
Yeah, I think the biggest one that we heard was just getting more of a diverse background of guests and even hosts on the show.
Right.
Like, for instance, when we first started doing our podcast in the first couple of years, we were bringing on guests that were well into their journey. So, they were probably doing it a year or two. Some of them had reached debt freedom. Some of them had paid off a ton of debt. And we were now bringing them on after that. We started hearing from people and saying, these stories are great, but sometimes it's hard for me to relate to because I'm just getting started. It would be great if you could bring on some people who have only been doing this for, 3 to 6 months, and what they're kind of experiencing when they first start, and what's helped them, and what things I can focus on. So we've tried to, the hard part, David, is with our subject matter, money, right?
Yeah.
It's a taboo topic for a lot of people. A lot of people are very embarrassed and shameful to talk about it. So it's hard getting people in that early journey to be willing to come on and open up, say, their skeletons in the closet, right? And show everybody their stuff, because they're still very early on in their journey. So it's hard sometimes to get someone who's confident enough to come on and share, because they feel like, well, I haven't done enough yet. Like, I don't have enough results to be like this big success story. And it's like, the reality is, it's like, we're not trying to find the most successful. We're trying to find a normal everyday person that's walking through this very early on in their life or their stage, and just getting started with some of the stuff that we talk about here, and sharing like what's been the biggest difference makers for you in getting started in these first, say, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, So those were probably the biggest pieces, though, is just getting different areas of the journey. And now some of the pieces that we're hearing, because we do have people that are now further on in their journey, is, well, we want to hear things more about like retirement or advanced personal finance stuff, retirement, investing, what's the next steps after you're out of debt, real estate, all of those types of things. So we're not sold on going that direction yet, because we feel the broader part of our audience is still at that step one of, I need to take control of my finances before I get to that part of investing and all that kind of stuff. But it is something that, we definitely have on our radar in the future of, okay, what do we do with these guests that we have now taken on this journey who are now at that next level? And we want to share more information from them. And what does that look like? So we're not quite there yet, but, thinking forward of, what are some of the things that we can do and talk about?
Yeah. The one thing I struggle with a little bit, Brad, I have like a lot of episodes behind me as well. You're in 200 episodes now. I kind of go back to like being in school, and you're midway through the school year. Some new family moves to town and a new kid walks into your class for the very first time, and they don't know anybody. They haven't been there since the beginning of the school year. They have to try to find a seat for them somewhere. Let's pull a table in, get them a spot to sit. And everyone's looking at this new kid like, who are you and where did you come from?
Right.
200 episodes. Your community has been following along on the journey. And then some random guy named Dave in Canada press play on episode 200. I've never heard 199 of your episodes. My first episode is episode 200. I'm coming in, that awkwardness of looking around going, oh, everybody knows everybody here. I'm the only one who doesn't know anyone. But this is a new podcast, and I want to find out what's going on. How do you welcome new listeners yet still maintain context for your family and friends that follow along on Debt Free Dad? How do you embrace these two worlds that are mashing together on every episode and welcoming new listeners? Do you have any tips for us?
Man, that's a good question. I think for us, we've always gone into it knowing that every show should be able to be consumed by whether you've been here for a while or you're a first-time listener.
Right.
So we don't want to create an episode that's, say, built on 50 previous episodes.
Right.
We want to be able to create content that you can come in here, and whether you're brand new or you're someone that's been here for a while, you're going to get something out of this show. And so we just try to pick out topics, and we try to not say, if you guys, and we do we do a lot of referencing of past episodes too, in the sense of, we're going to talk about this topic. And by the way, we did a whole episode on a little piece of this that we're going to talk about. This is episode X. Go back and listen to that to provide context of what we're going to talk about in this little section. So we try to give people like direction of, okay, we're talking about, like, for instance, when we talk about saving and we bring up the whole idea of a sinking fund, which a sinking fund is essentially just a savings goal for a particular purchase that's going to be in the future. We might bring that up briefly, but then we might say, hey, go back and check out episode 138 or whatever episode that was, so you can learn about sinking funds in a lot more detail and how you can apply them to your personal finances.
Good.
So we do a lot of that to kind of give people direction of where else to go. But yeah, I mean, initially we try to build our podcast knowing that I try to look at every person that's joining that day is brand new, and we've never had our existing listeners reach out and say, I feel like I'm always brand new. Like, I want to be a seasoned listener. No one's ever said that to us, so we just try to treat every episode independently. So where it doesn't build off of everything, like you have to go through and listen to everything to get a sense of what it is that we're talking about.
Yeah. I find it frustrating when I listen to a podcast and I hear the Dave and Brad show, and Dave says to Brad, hey, Brad, you remember when you did the thing with the thing? And Brad's like, yeah, that was good. Yeah, meanwhile, I'm a listener going, what are you talking about? I have no idea what this is. What's the thing of the thing? I have no idea. But everyone else that had been here forever, they're like, oh, yeah, that was great. That time with the thing.
Right.
Yeah, that was fun. And you're like, I totally don't feel welcome here. I have no idea what's going on. And anytime, I'm finding myself saying more often, if this is your first time listening to the show, welcome. Like, it's so amazing you found the podcast. I want you to feel welcome here. And we've got a lot of great episodes in the past, but this episode is really important because you're here. And thank you for being here. And I think for the listeners that have been here long term, they don't mind hearing that and then going, that's right, there are new people joining us in progress, and we need to welcome them as well. So it's a community building thing, I think, and you're really great at community. So I was kind of interested to get your feedback on that. So I love how you do that, though. It's good.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
So what's coming down the road for the podcast? You're a planner. You plan in advance for your shows. Do you have like kind of a long-term goal for the podcast?
As of right now, I think, where we're at right now is number one, we wanted to, this year, we saw some pretty significant growth, which is really great. TikTok played a huge role in that for us. So if you're a podcaster out there and you're not on TikTok, I would strongly recommend you get on TikTok and start sharing some of the content and stuff that you're putting out in your podcast and then directing towards people to your podcast, because we've seen lots of stuff happening from that area. Obviously, we try to do the same things on other social channels like Facebook and Instagram and YouTube Shorts and those types of things. But the Reels and the TikToks have been really, really good. But so for right now, I think, like I said, we just invested in the podcast to bring in this company to really kind of go through everything that we've been doing with a fine-tooth comb, find the areas where we can improve. And I know, like, for instance, some things, even just going through some of the little stuff that we've already started with this company. We've only been doing this for about maybe a week and a half, and just going through some of their coaching and working with them. Like, even just your introduction, your content, your editing, like when you finally get to the point of you're consistent and you're putting your information out there, it gets deeper. We can start going even deeper now with some of this information and spending, like, for instance, spending a significant time, more time on your intro than say on your overall content in your episode. Because if your intro stinks, nobody's going to stick around. Right. Nobody's going to listen to it. So, it's this whole idea of, okay, we want to really engage that listener and say, hey, look, this is what we're going to talk about today. Here's how this is going to help you as my listener, because we care about you. And this is what you're going to walk away with today. When you leave this episode, this is what you're going to get. And you can apply that to no matter what podcast niche you're in. I don't care what topic it is. Like, the listener is coming for something. And sometimes I think maybe us podcasters, and me included, sometimes we get selfish because we get in a topic that we really want to talk about. But what does that mean for your listener? Because that's what you're really doing it for, right? So it's really just bringing back home what are we here to do? How are we going to get these listeners to be like, yes, I need to listen to this. I'm going to get this thing out of doing this episode. And sometimes it's just all in the presentation and how you open up that intro. And so, we're hired this company to kind of go through, again, all of our stuff, where we're placing like ads and call to actions and all these things that we want our people to do after they listen to the show, to make sure that we're really optimizing the entire episode. Because here at our Debt Free Dad, our idea is, hopefully, we want Debt Free Dad podcast listeners to eventually become Roots members. That's what we would love for them to do. So we want to take them through this journey and show them, like, hey, this is how we help people. This is how you can get started. And oh, by the way, we also have this thing over here for those of you who really want to take this at a deeper level. Like, here it is. We want to take people through that journey. Now, not everyone's going to go on that journey, and that's okay. But we want to make sure that our podcast is optimized to the point where it's going to that next level and people do know where to go. So there isn't that friction or that frustration on the end of, okay, now what do I do? So again, I think for us, as far as the future, we want to make sure before we start really thinking about things like monetization and ads and things like that, which we could do and which we will do, hopefully, we want to make sure like everything is tweaked and everything's good and that podcast is humming. And then once that's done, we're hoping that the downloads will increase even more. Right now, we're averaging anywhere between 12 to 13,000 downloads per month right now. So we're hoping to obviously get that increased and then, taking that thing to the next level and hopefully being able to start monetizing it and having it as another revenue stream inside of our business.
Good. I love it. So I have one more question for you at the end, Brad. But again, what I'd love to get from you is information again on how we connect with you around Roots, around the podcast, your website. And if you can give us one practical debt-free podcaster tip that we can put into play for our podcast spending and all of that from your perspective, I'd love to get a tip from you on how we can do our budgeting better around money. But yeah, where do we find you and what's one of your tips for us?
Yeah, so I would say if you want to listen to the Debt Free Dad podcast, obviously you can search Debt Free Dad podcast on all major podcast platforms. That's definitely where we would love for you to get started. If you want more information about Debt Free Dad, just go to debtfreedad.com. You can find all of our information there about social channels that we're on. If you want to connect with us there, we've got a lot of free resources on our website, including our free Life Without Payments workshop, which is a really great place to start. For instance, like you mentioned, David, 200 episodes. Wow, where do I get started? Like the workshop is kind of like let's say just a really quick 90 minutes of, these are the things that you should focus on if you want to stop paycheck to paycheck living. And then you can go to that podcast to use it as your support and accountability to kind of keep you going along the journey.
Nice.
Right. As far as a tip, man, I would say be okay starting small. Be okay not having the best of equipment right away. Okay. Be okay not having and spending all the money on, all the things right away. Like just keep it as basic as you can. And what's amazing to me, David, about podcasting is it's pretty inexpensive. It's not an expensive thing to get into. Now you can buy some expensive things.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you need an okay microphone. You need to learn how to do some basic editing and things. And, you don't need a ton of stuff though to get going. I think when we started our show, I think we maybe invested $700 total. And I'm still using a lot of that same equipment right now. I haven't changed much of anything.
Wow.
So I think from a financial standpoint, man, podcasting is so reasonable in a lot of ways. Now, what makes it more expensive as time goes on is, advertising and figuring out how to make the thing grow and investing in those areas. But to get started, man, that's what I love about it is that if you got something you're really passionate about talking about, teaching and helping people with, man, it's just such and you're willing to go like the long game with it. It is just such a economical thing for a business to do, to get their message out there, to get their information out there. I mean, I think we're on, I don't know where you're at, David. We're on Buzzsprout, but I think Buzzsprout, we pay like $18 a month, I think, for our episode, for our podcast. I mean, $18 a month for, 4 hours of editing. And that's plenty for our episodes every week or 4 hours of hosting. And it's like, that's so cheap. Right. So, if you're a business owner and you're looking to, sell your services and, get your message out there, I think podcasting is still one of the best ways to do it if you're invested in the long game.
So I think that's a great companion podcast for you to think about, Brad, is you have the Debt Free Dad, maybe the Debt Free Podcaster could be the companion podcast to go along with what you do and just talk about that, because I would listen to that as well on top of your Debt Free Dad. So
yeah, love
yeah, I love it. Again, Brad, I just love your show. I love what you do. Shout out to all of your co-hosts and all the people behind the scenes that bring Debt Free Dad to life on a podcast in your community. The things that you do there with your team are outstanding. You yourself have an amazing story, personal story. And I feel so welcomed and so accepted in your community as a listener. And there's something special about your podcast. And I've been telling everybody, you got to listen to this show. My wife's listening now. Everyone's that I see, I'm like, oh, you got to listen to this. So, and you're listening to us right now. I want you to go over and I want you to listen to an episode of the Debt Free Dad and leave some feedback as well, because this is a podcast that you can listen to in the privacy of your earbuds. Nobody needs to know you're struggling with your money at this point in time, but there's a community around you that can support you and help you get out of debt, be healthier, better, show up better for your family, for yourself, just by tackling those things that tie you down. And for us, that's usually money and bad ways of spending money. Black Friday just happened. We're all looking at our credit cards going, oh my goodness. So, there's a better way. And Brad's here with you on Debt Free Dad. And I would encourage you to go check it out. It's a great podcast. Brad, thank you so much for all of our technical problems we've been having today. Yeah. You're a champ. And I really appreciate you making time to do this. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Appreciate you as always. It's been great.
All right, everyone, go check out the podcast and all the information will be in the show notes. Again, Brad, thanks so much.
Thank you. So
thanks for being part of the How to Podcast family. Really appreciate you being here, coming back for episode after episode. And to those super How to Podcast family members, you know who you are. You went back to episode 1 and you've listened to now many episodes of the How to Podcast series. Thank you. I have 2 things to ask you to do today. Whether this is your first time here, thank you, by the way, for joining us, or you've been here for a long, long time, thank you to you as well. I would love for you to share this show with someone in the podcasting community that doesn't know about this podcast at all, and let them know about the How to Podcast series, and give them a suggestion of an episode to listen to, give them a number, send them there. Number 2, I would really, really love to connect with you. So, howtopodcast.ca is my website, howtopodcast.ca, because that's a Canadian website and I'm in Canada. Howtopodcast.ca, and go over there and leave me a voice message on my SpeakPipe. You'll see it there, and I would love to hear from you, to hear your amazing podcaster voice, and include you in a future episode. I'll bring in your message and play it for the world, and they can hear about your show and connect with you as another fellow How to Podcast family member. So I would love to meet with you and hear your voice at howtopodcast.ca. Keep podcasting, keep doing the thing, hit record, and get your message into the world. Can't wait to hear your show. Thanks for listening. Take care.